Hey there, welcome to the Posit Data Science Hangout. I'm Libby Heron, and this is a recording of our weekly community call that happens every Thursday at 12 p.m. US Eastern Time. If you are not joining us live, you miss out on the amazing chat that's going on. So find the link in the description where you can add our call to your calendar and come hang out with the most supportive, friendly, and funny data community you'll ever experience. Can't wait to see you there. I am so excited to be joined by our featured leader today, Harvey Lieberman, Associate Director of Data Science at Novartis. Hello, Harvey. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Libby. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Oh, we're so happy to have you here. If you are a part of the our pharma community, you probably already know Harvey. Harvey, I would love it if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what you like to do for fun.
Sure. So my name's Harvey Lieberman. I work in pharma industry. Have done for 27 years now. It's a long time. Um, and I'm a data scientist. I've worked in both the discovery setting and the development setting, and I'm sure we'll go into a little bit about that as we chat a little bit more. Um, for fun, I guess I'm what you would call a little bit of a geek because I like to do data science for fun as well as for work. I also have three kids and spend a lot of time with them, shuttling them around, doing different things, and so on. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
I think that you'll find that you're in a big group of other geeks. So we
Exactly.
probably we probably identify with you. Um, I would love it if you could explain just a little bit of context for us so that we can all ask questions that are informed by knowledge. What is Novartis?
Mhm.
What does Novartis do? And what do you do at Novartis?
Okay, so Novartis is a big pharma company, have many products out there. You've probably seen lots of ads on TV with regards to many of the products. I joined Novartis 5 years ago, and I'm working in a biostatistics group in drug development, in early drug development. So the role that the group that I'm in has is as drugs are moving towards the development phase and into development, which is where we're starting to test them, potentially test them in humans for the first time. We get involved. We're I would say data science, biostatistics, and programming, um, doing all the statistical work to ensure that things are working, that things are safe, um, on what is initially the first couple of phases of drug development, which are where we have a few patients, maybe up tens or hundred, a couple of hundreds maybe. And then that passes on to full development, where there's a lot more time involved and effort in bringing these things to the market. But prior to my role here, I was also working in drug discovery, which is where we'll do a lot of work in trying to identify the molecules that will become medicines that will then move into development as well. And one last thing, there's an enormous attrition rate as you start in discovery moving towards development. So most of the things that you work on, certainly from a discovery and early development perspective, most of the things that you work on don't make it to the market for one reason or another.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, usually when I hear the word attrition rate, I'm used to talking to a lot of people analytics folks, and that's people leaving a company, right? Is attrition or leaving a team,
Yeah,
leaving positions. So, but this is attrition of potential molecules, right? Like
yeah.
this is like the things that are viable, that the pool of them get less and less as you move on. Well, I wanted to let everybody know a quick little like a short list of topics that we could ask Harvey about. I've never done this before, but I think it might be helpful just to help us like
Yep,
build context around these questions. And that is questions about R Pharma. If you've heard about R Pharma at all, if you've been to the R Pharma conference, if you know what the R Pharma community is, or if you don't know, we can ask Harvey about that. Um, we can also talk about Harvey's journey into data science because it is a little bit non-traditional. He doesn't have a statistics background or a computational background. And I think that there are a lot of people here who could identify with that as well. There are some questions that we could ask about career advice. Harvey's been in the field for a very, very long time. And Harvey also has a special place in his heart for automated processes and the way that that can sort of alter your career. So, Harvey, I would love to just get started by asking you to describe a little bit about our pharma and how it got started.
sure. Yeah. So Iron Pharma is essentially a community. So becoming what is now somewhat of a large community, I would say. Um, we started in 2017. In 2017, our industry, the pharma industry, was at a point where people were starting to get interested in the use of open source. And just to caveat this, Pharma traditionally has used SAS for statistical programming, and there was starting to become a movement to see, well, could R be used instead of SAS, and where could it be used, and would it be advantageous to move in these kinds of directions? So several people from multiple companies were starting to dabble in this area. And there wasn't really a forum where people could connect, could talk about it, could share information. So few people got together um, partly through Phil Boucher from Posit, which was then back in the day our studio, who helped pull people together, pull some like-minded people together, and we decided to put together a conference, the first one in 2018, so that people could share what they've been working on. And the first conference was at Harvard University. Harvard were really nice. They gave us a space where we could use. Pulled together, there were about 150 people for 2 days, and it went really well. And we repeated it in 2019, and then in 2020 we were looking to make it a little bit bigger, so that more people could come, more people could share. Um, we then came across COVID, like everyone else, and pivoted to what has since then become an online, a virtual conference. And we've just gone on from there. So we also do a face-to-face summit once a year. We try and tag this onto PositConf. And really what the group is it's just a large community of people who are all like-minded, want to work within open source, want to use open source within the industry. But also, I would say that it's not only people from the pharma and biotech industries, it's open to everyone. We just use
Yeah.
this as really a focus on some of the presentations and the tools, but really it's a large community that's open to everyone.
I love that. It's something that I tell everybody. Like, you don't have to be in pharma to go to the R Pharma conference and to go to the workshops and to get a lot out of them. I'm not in pharma at all. I have a business background. I attend R Pharma. I go to the workshops. I watch the lectures. I mean, it's so much fun. I highly encourage everybody to go check it out. Okay, Harvey, we have so many questions coming in. Let's go ahead and start getting some questions from Slido. So the most popular question in Slido is actually, what data science projects do you do for fun? You mentioned that you do data science for funsies. What do you got common
Yeah.
programs?
Um, oh God. So I just I, I'm a big fan of R, of Python, of other languages. I'm teaching myself Go at the moment, so
Mhm.
that's a fun experience. Uh, Really, it's just finding data from a day-to-day um, point of view and playing around with it. So we have things, obviously, things like the Tidy Tuesday. Um, if When it comes to December, I always try and do as much of Advent of Code as possible. If anyone does that, that's a lot of fun, especially to learn a new language. Um, I'm playing around with Gen AI, just like everyone else probably is, as much as possible, but trying to do it from playing with the APIs and from a programming perspective. So, for example, it doesn't sound like fun, but one of the things I'm trying to do with the AI side, and I've seen this done by other people too, is to take all the information from my from our, for example, bank and credit card statements and give me an idea as to what we're spending and where and how we can do better. And doing it using local LLMs, so nothing's going out. So the idea of being able to do this all locally, that's just one of the things. Plus, just little snippets of code whenever I can. I try and push them out. I try and blog them out wherever possible because I find that it ends up as a repository that I can go back to at any point to find what I did.
Which is so nice. Yeah, your GitHub turns into your own little like code library. It's
Mhm.
another thing I highly recommend. I have a banking background and I attempt to do my own like financial analysis all the time. And I'm always stumped by the messiness of sick codes. I don't know if anybody else has run into that or not, where like the little code that tells you what the industry of the business is. So basically where you're
Yeah.
spending your money. Is so frustrating, especially if you do a lot of buying through like PayPal or Amazon or Chewy for pet products. Like a lot of things can be very confusing when they get through those filters. All right,
Hmm.
let's do another question from Slido. These questions have been rolling in here. A big one is around SaaS, and there are several questions that kind of mention this. So let's do this one as a summary. And I have a question from Gregory Power. Gregory, if you are available, I would love it if you could ask your question live.
Yeah, of course.
Hi.
I I work for a municipality in Sass's backyard. I won't disclose which one. Um, um, but anywho, yeah, how was it transitioning from SaaS, and how is it migrating from this monolith of infrastructure? Because you're talking to someone who had to restart all three of their servers this morning because our SaaS cluster went down.
Oh no.
So, so I can speak probably from somewhat from an industry perspective as opposed to an internal perspective because I would say we're going through it at the moment. Other companies have gone through it, and there are lots of companies within the industry at various stages of going through this, and lots of people are. I would say not really stumbling along the route, but it can be a little bit challenging. Um, I would say that within the pharma industry, if you look at some companies, for example, GSK, Roche have done a lot of work, and they've actually presented and put out a lot of work on the transition. One of the biggest challenges, I would say, rather than an infrastructure perspective, is a training perspective, especially when you've got people who have been using something like SaaS for a long time. Just the thought process of how you would approach a problem coming from more of a more traditional programming language approach is quite different. And you also, when we're looking at moving, or when we're looking as an industry moving from SaaS to R, or transitioning SaaS to R, I would say there's more to it than that. It's more transitioning from, as you put it, a monolithic type approach to something that is more of an open source approach, where we're not talking about just R. We're talking about maybe using Git or something else for versioning, for version control, looking into where CI/CD can step in. So it's this concept of bringing people along who might be used to working in one way for a very long time to what you might call more modern approaches. And it's an interesting journey to take people on. And certainly, the Git concept, or the GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket concept. When you show someone how they can do it just with their own code, how they can manage it so much better, you tend to have people coming along for this journey. So that's one of the things I'd say.
I like that. It's focused on the advantages that you see on a personal level first, and then transition that into, like, we could be doing this on an organizational level or a team level or whatever it is. It sounds like there are a lot of people in the chat who are in some way familiar with the SAS to R or SAS to Python journey, or even the Stata to R or Stata to Python journey, depending on where they're coming from. Thank you, Gregory, for that great question. I have another question from Lou. Lou, would you like to unmute and ask your question? And hi, Lou. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too, Libby. Thank you. So, Harvey, part of your intro and part of the description for this talk is that you'd like to automate processes. You'd like to make workflows easier. And so I was curious, how is Gen AI either affecting that now, or how is that affecting it in the future?
Okay, so let me take a step back and give an example of an old one, because I think many of us in data science or working in data science have probably had experiences like this. So I worked in a group where I was working on a biomarker analysis. And in this one example, I had a colleague come over from Germany to visit, and he was working in a completely different group. He was working on with bioreactors, and he had a setup with an experiment with 48 bioreactors. And it collected a whole bunch of data over a period of time, and they analyzed it with an Excel workbook. So he showed me an Excel workbook that had 48 sheets with data in, and the data did not start in the top left-hand corner. There was some notes coming down, and then you had tables of data for the first 48 sheets, and then the next 20 or 30 were charts that they'd made by hand. And it had taken someone about 3 months, I was told, to work on this. And so this was an example where I could take something and say, well, we can't get the raw data, but we can pull the data out from the Excel. We can put it together in a shiny dashboard, and we can just look at all the graphs and look at all the charts. And two things happen. One is it took me 1 hour to do this over lunch. And secondly, I found mistakes in their copying and pasting of formulae from cell to cell. So as I say, it was about 3 months worth of work to get to this point, which could have been saved easily. And I think we've all had situations like this. And the nice thing about this is it took someone who was a lab scientist, and actually they went back and it turned them into a data scientist because they started to learn R and Python to be able to do these things. This is one of the many, many examples. I hope we get to others, but to your question, Lou, how is Gen AI going to do this? How is Gen AI going to contribute to this? I think it's going to contribute hugely. I think what it's going to do is what we've had the opportunity to do as data scientists in the past is to take some of this mundane stuff and replace it with an automated process that's much more efficient, much faster. With Gen AI, we now have tools at our disposal that are going to be able to do this even more efficiently. So I know people. It goes back and forth to the conversation with Gen AI. Is it a replacement? I look at this more as a tool. This is another tool in our box that we'll be able to use. And one of the nice things it will be able to do is when you come to, say, a data automation task, we'll be able to put things in place using these kinds of tools that can check that what we've got in place is working as we expect it as well. So I see these kinds of tools really speeding up the process, really helping moving forward and becoming more robust.
I like that. It reminds me of our conversation with Jay Timmerman at Biogen, where he really suggested everybody take a more practical approach to thinking about Gen AI. Like, what are these really, really sort of boring, mundane, practical things that can be fixed and improved, and think of it less in like a magical, sparkly way. Thank you so much, Lou, for the fantastic question.
Could I just have one quick follow-up, which is, so thank you, Harvey. That was great. And I strongly agree with the point of like, it's another tool. It's not a replacement for data science. But you mentioned the spreadsheet that had errors in it. I know everyone's shocked here that there was a complex spreadsheet with errors in it. No one has seen that before. But a lot of people are paranoid about Gen AI. So just can you comment on, in terms of when you trying to introduce Gen AI, is there a lot of pushback from, oh no, we can't trust it because of hallucinations? Or is there more openness than that?
I'd say within our company, and I'd say within the industry as a whole, people are starting to approach this. So there's caution. The pharma industry is somewhat risk averse anyway as an industry. People are starting to use it more. It's being encouraged more to use on a day-to-day basis. And what we're seeing is that people are starting to use it to automate and to speed up some of their day-to-day work. So, for example, something as simple as summarize a meeting so that I don't have to read through. And I feel that as people start to get more and more on board with that, we're going to find more and more of a move through. I feel like the industry as a whole is going to be somewhat protective of throwing all of their data into this. And I would say that most companies, the few that I know working in the area, have something where you've got certain business rules in place. So do not put your data into something that's going out, but utilize these kinds of things to make your day-to-day work more effective, more efficient. And that's where we are at the moment. Now, where things move in the future is, we've seen so much growth within the last year or two, who can tell? But I see us getting to a point where we're going to be using the tools a lot more.
I love it. Mike, I know that you have a little bit of perspective here as well. Mike is at Pfizer. Would you like to chime in?
Yeah, actually, it's a kind of based on what Harvey was just saying about sharing proprietary information externally in public-facing LLMs. I'm guessing, I know at Pfizer we have kind of internal LLM models for dealing with stuff. I'd be interested to know from folks in the call, whether, maybe in the chat, whether they have for within their companies if they're going outside to public-facing ChatGPT or Claude or that kind of stuff, or whether they have similar internal engineering.
Harvey, did you want to touch on that, or does anybody in the chat have anything to share?
I'd say a combination. It's partly dependent on what you need. We certainly have the public facing with big disclaimer of do not put business information in there, and then we have internal more ring fenced to be able to experiment with some stuff internally too.
I see some talk in the chat. Stephanie saying totally against policy to use external tools, internally hosted ones only, and I'm seeing a lot of agreement there in some sort of feedback, emoji feedback. I think a lot of places have maybe within the past year implemented some AI use policies, right? Maybe you can chime in the chat and let us know what your org is telling you to do or not do with your LLM use. I have a question that I would love to just pivot a little bit to that's career oriented, Harvey. Are you in the position of hiring and building teams and stuff? And if you are, there's someone in the chat who asked an anonymous question, and it says, how do you recommend structuring our data science portfolios or projects to communicate what you're working on, especially when people are looking for Python or SAS users and you're an R user? And they say that they would love feedback from the chat too. So if you're in the chat and you have tips on this, please add them.
So not in a hiring position at the moment, but there are, I believe, opportunities within our company, certainly within the industry as a whole. And I'd say this is a very exciting time within the pharma industry to work within data science, because as I said, the whole industry is going through this modernization of tooling thing. So if the question was more along how do you is it more along the lines of building a portfolio, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. Like, so how do you structure your data science portfolio to communicate your value when you're an R user versus a SAS or Python user? I think that the feeling of this question is that people who are hiring are looking for everybody except for me. I've sort of felt that way as well at different times. Maybe people in the chat can identify with this, where you're like, oh, it seems like every position is hiring for this thing that I don't have, right? Or this skill that I don't have. So maybe just some general tips on standing out as an applicant for a data science position with your portfolio.
Yeah, that's a good thing. See, I've approached this as someone who has a broad knowledge of a lot of languages. So I would say I'm somewhat of a specialist in R. I do a lot of work in Python, but I've also done a lot of work in working with database systems, different types of databases, and things outside of the language itself. So, for example, working with SQL or Mongo or other types of database technologies, you can somewhat stand out by having a broad knowledge across several different types of technologies. Even if you're not an expert in them, being able to utilize these within a language. So, for example, working with databases within Python and R, there are lots of packages that you can use to work with these data structures, and some more modern ones too. The other thing I'd say is that within our industry and within data science as a whole, contributing to open source projects.
Ooh, that's a great idea.
Is a huge thing to get your name out there. So
lots of nods from the Zoom grid right now, by the way, if anyone's just listening.
There's and I think, I'm probably preaching to the choir to many people on this call. There are so many projects that you can either contribute to, or you can start up your own and put it out there and try and gain some traction on it. But just by starting, just taking on some issues, even just responding, even just creating an issue, is something to start the ball rolling. And as you do so, you find, we've got this community. We talked about the Iron Pharma community. You start to become part of other communities. And one of the things I would say, having worked for many years now, is that being part of a community and knowing people within the community, having people to reach out to, is a really good way to start to get going in a career, or even if you're halfway through a career.
100%, 150% agree with everything Harvey just said. And to sort of gather a little bit of input from the chat, Mike says, build a portfolio on GitHub, even if it's just Tidy Tuesday examples or pet projects. Absolutely. Do that. I would say any way that you can work out loud. It does not have to be perfect. It can be very, very intimidating when you're just getting started. You feel like you have to be the best at something. I encourage you to be exactly who you are, where you are right now, and do that out loud and show your willingness to learn things, to be bad at things. All of that stuff is very, very valuable. Mike says it doesn't have to be polished. It just has to be honest. I will second that. Tidy Tuesday. I've been doing Pidy Tuesday. Like I'm a much heavier R user than I am a Python user, but I've been using Python since grad school. And so I'm challenging myself to do Tidy Tuesday in Python right now and sharing it with the Pidy Tuesday hashtag on Blue Sky or LinkedIn or wherever I am. And if you see my stuff, you'll see it's very much not perfect or polished. I'm not even sharing my code all the time because I'm giving myself 30 minutes to do something. Get out there and do that and find some people who are willing to do that with you. All right. Thank you so much for that anonymous question. It was great. Rohan, you have a question on here that has risen to the top with votes. Would you like to unmute and ask it?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So my question is, what are the differences in approach and philosophy regarding data analysis, statistical testing, and machine learning when working in drug discovery versus drug development? Most of my work is in the discovery section for context in my work.
Okay, I would say so. Development is far more structured in its approach than discovery. My experience in discovery has always been you're certainly much freer to experiment with something new, to dive into something very different, completely new. So one example of the type of approach would be that in drug development, we're very concerned about validation all the way through. Are you comfortable enough to say that you're very confident with every step of the way, that you have documentation to back it up, and we have very strict rules and SOPs as to how to move? In discovery, you're in a much more open environment. So just the example of a new R package comes out, it would be very easy to pull that into a discovery setting. It would be more challenging to pull that into a development setting unless you've run some internal testing, some internal validation to say that you and the company are happy for you to move that way. So I'd say it's one of the biggest things. I'd also say, along the lines we touched on AI, I'd say that certainly if you look at the AI work that has been done, the discovery community took to it faster than the development community. Although there are some things going on within the development community that will be catching up to that.
Thank you, Harvey. Great question, Rohan. As always, I love Rohan's questions. Speaking of someone whose questions I always love, Arsenis, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Thanks so much, Libby. And thank you, Harvey, for joining us today. My question here, I think, Libby, you're referring to the one that's at the top right now. I actually have two in there.
Yep, the one that's at the top. I'll put it in the chat as well.
Cool. So I'm going to go with that one. Harvey, my question is about automating processes. So sometimes automating a process is kind of a thing that you discover that you can do while you're doing something that's like a main track project, but there's no time allocated for you to kind of shoot off to the side and take on this other project. So when you're not the boss, for example, how do you talk people into letting you take time to go on and automate that when you don't know that there necessarily will be like benefits from it?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So really, and I'll give another example of this. A group that I used to be in a previous company, we had some really smart people working in the lab, and we could collect data called mass spectrometry data. So it was high quality lab data. It would take about 3 days to collect the data, and it would take about 3 weeks to analyze it. And the analysis took so long, partly because people were moving between 7 pieces of software. So what you often find, I love the look on your face when I say that. What you often find is that certainly going back a little while, the equipment manufacturers, lab equipment manufacturers, are very good at making high quality equipment, and they're good at making software that can capture data, but they don't traditionally have not invested a huge amount in how you would analyze that data afterwards for specific experiments. So rather than go through 7 pieces of software, of which one was Excel in the middle, so data was copied to Excel, calculations were performed, it was then taken from there to something else. So this upset me, to say the least, when I first saw it. And it didn't take long to write within spare time. This was actually within spare time to write a pipeline in R. And this was at the very start. This was really early on with Shiny. So Shiny was just coming out. I said, I can write something in one language, in one workflow that can do it. And it can automate a lot of what we're doing, or what the group was doing by hand. And in fact, I was working in a different group. I saw what was going on here, and I asked to join this group to help with this kind of approach. And we reduced the analysis time from 3 weeks down to 1 hour. And I'll give one other example, because it's very much related. Within the same group, another group was collecting data, and what we did was wanted to automate the data preparation as well. So we wanted to use the hardware automation with robotics and the analysis automation at the end of it. And I had a lot of skeptics when we did this, but we did it as a proof of concept to show we can match the way it's being done by hand. So you had someone in the lab pipetting by hand samples, running the samples, and then doing the analysis by hand. And the data preparation by robot wasn't as fast as someone doing it by hand, but the point is it could run overnight. it could run 24 hours. So we could
Didn't
do
need to
that.
sleep or take naps.
Exactly. And you then do the analysis afterwards. And I did this, and we had thousands of samples, and it would take about a week to analyze by hand. We did the analysis. We showed that for most of the samples, our robot could pipette as accurate as a human. And when we did the data analysis for most of the samples, or for all of the samples, it could pipette as accurate. And for the analysis, most of them were within less than 1% of a human, except for 2 samples which seemed ridiculously out. So I went back through all the calculations, I went back through all the analysis, and I couldn't find out what was wrong. And it was getting to the point where I was getting incredibly frustrated at myself for not being able to spot something that must have been an obvious bug. So I asked to see the raw data, because they'd given me the data from the machine that was part processed. And I looked at the raw data, and it didn't match what I had. And then I looked at what they'd given me that was part processed, and they'd switched 2 of the names of the samples around. So it was a human error that had led to me not matching the results exactly. When we switched them back, it matched exactly. And this is another human error that would have been carried through. So if you can show, that you can speed things up, and most importantly, that you can remove the errors that crop in a day-to-day, and I think it was Lou who touched on, who hasn't seen errors in an Excel spreadsheet. If you can show that you remove that error, then that is when people start to look and get interested. And you end up with 2 complete opposite, or in my experience, 2 complete opposite ways of responding to this. You never get apathy. You either get, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life, we have to implement it immediately, or this is the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life, and it's coming from my job, and I want to hide it.
Oh my goodness. I will say, sometimes it's Excel's fault. Maybe you've given it something that looks like a date.
Yeah.
I always tell people, just don't open that in Excel. Don't do it. Just don't open that CSV file in Excel and resave it. Thank you so much, Arsenis, for the fantastic question. And I have a question here that's a 2-parter from Noor. And Noor, I would like you to pick one of your questions. You have 2 in there. I'll let you pick one to ask.
That's just really mean. Okay.
Ah,
Since the first one arguably has kind of been touched on in various ways a little bit, I will go with the second one, which is, hi, my name is Nora. I'm a bioinformatician. What are recommendations for folks who are trying to pivot into the pharma sphere for people who have a bioinformatics and or stat background, or just in general for people who are trying to pivot into the pharma sphere, especially if they don't come from pharma experience? What would you recommend, et cetera, et cetera? I will take myself offline.
thanks, Noor.
Okay, so if you're coming in from and we're obviously with the data science hangout, we're looking at and thinking about data science. There are, I would say, several online resources, and there was a shout out to group at Roche who did clinical, I'm trying to think exactly what it is, and someone might be able to put it in the chat, a clinical data science course on Coursera that's available to take, which is a really great way that explains some from the clinical data science and reporting side of things. That's certainly a good entry point to get a feel for some of what's out there. I would also say that as well as the community that we've got, the Pharma one, and once again, everyone's welcome to come and come to all the workshops that we put on, which will help bring people up to speed. There's the Pharmaverse group, which is essentially a group of people many of whom work in the pharma industry, developing our packages to try and solve common problems. That's a great organization to get involved in. And there's plenty of open source development work going on there. If you want to, if you're looking to be able to contribute to packages within an environment and within a community that can help, make the connections that you might need to get into the pharma space. And once again, it comes back to something that's cropped up before. It helps build your portfolio as well. It shows an interest in the space and will certainly help move things along.
Thank you, Harvey. Nora, thank you for asking that wonderful question. And let's see what else we have got on board here, because we only have about 10 minutes left and it's really more like 8. I have the same question as Cecilia. So Cecilia, I would love it if you could ask your question.
Hi, hello. So my question, I think I was a bit hooked about the background part, but I really didn't understand what was your background. Maybe I missed it. But the real question is about like how or how much is our pharma different from other R related field? And I think it's because I always had like R usage in a certain field, and I am just curious about how it's different in different fields. Don't know if you have any insights.
Sure. So I don't think I went through my background fully. So just real brief. My background's in chemistry, not in data science, not in computational. But I grew up in the 1980s when personal computers were coming out. So I'm the generation that really got stuck into personal computers when I was in my teens. And so it stuck with me all the way through the concept of always using coding to solve problems. So that's where that came from. And so every step through when I was in different types of chemistry and chemical development and biomarkers, it was always, well, can we write the code to do this for us? I want to be able to sit back and watch it happen. And believe it or not, my goal has it's a crazy thing to say, but my goal has always been, can I automate myself out of a job and then move on to another one? So it's always, can I get to the point of it's doing what I would do? To the second point, the Iron Pharma group, it came about, as I mentioned, to really focus within the pharma industry, which was certainly at that time going through a transition, and still is going through a transition. And it was always this idea of, can we build a community of people working in the same way, coming across the same problems. And the thing that comes to mind, there was there's a law. I'm just trying to think of it. I think it's called Joy's Law, which was named after Bill Joy, who used to be the CEO of Sun Microsystems. And he said his law was something along the lines of the smartest people don't work for you, or the smartest people are not in the room. And it's a law based on the fact that no one company can have all of the smartest people. They're just, because knowledge is dispersed. Knowledge by its very definition is dispersed, and it's also what's known as sticky, because knowledge tends to stay in certain places. The group we tried to form, and all the others, it's an attempt to take on this concept of, in a way, of open source, which is, can we bring everything together? Can we share everything? Can everyone contribute? Our group isn't really different to other R groups in that aspect. We tend to focus a little bit more on the pharma problems, but we have workshops where we would be looking at different, more general R packages, as well as some of the more focused ones.
Thank you, Harvey. I really love that you have a unique background. And I think that a lot of people here will say the same, that they came to data science sideways before data science was a thing. Maybe everybody can share in the chat what their background is, whether that was their first set of jobs or what their undergrad or master's degree is in. Because I know some of these faces I'm looking at have sociology degrees. Some of them have psychology degrees. And a lot of my professors in my undergrad, which was very, very focused on business analytics and mathematical optimization for business, were educational psychology professors, actually. And they're where I learned the bulk of my data science skills. Harvey, you have touched on it a little bit here and there with some words of wisdom, but we always ask everybody at the Hangout for a piece of career advice. Is there a little bit of career advice that has been really meaningful or helpful to you or that you like to give out?
I would say, I would say, and I think this has come out probably 1,000 times before, which is find what you really like doing and do it. It's really simple. In a previous position, I used to come in on for example, I used to come in on a Monday morning, and I would see people looking so miserable. And I'd ask, why do you look so sad? And they'd complain, well, it's Monday morning. And whereas I'm coming in, sometimes I couldn't wait to get out of bed on a Monday and come back to do the thing that I love. And this is why playing with data and coding and stuff is my passion outside of work too. And I'm sure a lot of people on the call probably feel the same way. We love what we do, and just keep doing it until you don't enjoy it anymore, and then find something else that you enjoy. So that would be, it's not real. I guess it's not really career advice, but the way I look at it is, this is where I'm spending most of my waking time. So you better be doing something that you really, really enjoy.
Thank you, Harvey. And for anybody who's just listening, I wish you can see the chat right now because it is so full of all of these different people chiming in and saying where they were working, what they were doing, what their degrees are in. And very few of them are statistics degrees. Very few of them are what you would think of as a really traditional data science degree. We've got atmospheric science, we've got math, we've got education, political science, sociology, psychology. We have Joey saying janitor at the movie theater. Joey's quick stop as a sociologist along the way was not that quick. Because I know Joey. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing all of your bits and pieces. No, we have 2 minutes left, so I think we better say goodbye to Harvey. Say thank you so much, Harvey, for spending time with us. Thank you, everybody, for all of your wonderful and amazing questions. We could not get to all of them. There are a handful that are left over, but some of them got touched on along the way.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It was wonderful spending time with you. Everybody, I hope you enjoy your Thursday. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week and that you come back and hang out with us again next week. We will have Nick Wan with us, the Senior Director of Baseball Analytics for the Cincinnati Reds. So if you are interested in sports analytics at all or streaming, because Nick Wan is also a streamer, you might know him from things like Sliced or VizBuzz. If anybody has heard of that, Nick is a ton of fun. Can't wait to talk with him next week on the day before my birthday. It'll be a good fun. All right, everybody. I will let everybody drop off, give you a couple more seconds here to save the chat if you would like to. The 3 dots in the top of your chat allow you to click and say save chat. That way you don't lose all of these wonderful resources.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Harvey. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.